All right, students, welcome back. Today I'm going to try and briefly introduce adoptions, although it might end up being a longer video than normal. But that's only because even to introduce adoptions is going to take a little bit of time, because the idea of an adoption is actually, legally speaking, it's rather simple, but the adoption itself can become very complex, and that's because there's a whole litany of laws and regulations that govern adoptions. And that's, the state of Florida has laws, of course, and then if you're talking about an interstate adoption, there's another set of regulations. If you're talking about international adoption, that's a whole nother set of laws. There's also federal laws that need to be followed, but I'm going to focus on Florida adoptions primarily because this is about Florida adoptions. So what is an adoption? Well, legally speaking, it's pretty straightforward, and I think most people probably have an intuitive sense of what it is. It's the creation of a legal relationship between a parent and a child that did not exist before. Now, this can be done. You can adopt a minor, or you can also adopt an adult. So it's not just about adopting minor children. You can also have adoptions of adults as well. That's permitted under the statute. Now, as far as the creation of this new legal relationship between a child and a parent, it necessitates the termination of parental rights as well. So because of the implications of these permanent changes in legal rights involving most of the time minor children, there is a lot of oversight built into the statutes that govern it. So let's jump right to them. In the state of Florida, adoptions are governed by Chapter 63. Chapter 63 is known as the Florida Adoption Act, and it has all the laws that govern adoption in it. So if you're interested in learning the law of adoption in the state of Florida, this is the chapter to begin with. Now, having said that, you also need to be familiar with Chapter 39. As you can see here, 63.037 refers to cases resulting from the termination of parental rights under Chapter 39. Well, what's Chapter 39? Chapter 39 has to do with children who are in the care and custody of the state, dependent children. For purposes of this video, I will just refer to them as foster care children. So these are children who, for one reason or another, are under the care and protection of the state. Oftentimes, these children can and will be adopted, but it's important to know that Chapter 39 has a different legislative intent. The intent of Chapter 39 isn't necessarily adoptions. The primary intent of Chapter 39 is reunification between the children and their biological parents. That's the goal. The goal is to protect the child, pull them out of the home, limit the parental rights, and then seek to rehabilitate that relationship, rehabilitate the biological parents, and promote reunification of the family. So there can be a bit of a conflict between Chapter 39 and the desire to adopt a child if the biological parents are not interested in terminating their parental rights. Now, under the Chapter 39, parental rights can be terminated both voluntarily and involuntarily. That's down here under Part 10. So if you go to Part 10, it talks about the termination of parental rights. And again, that's a necessary first step in an adoption. So if this step hasn't been taken, then an adoption can't go forward. So for those of you who are interested in adopting foster care children, just know that there's some conflict in a sense that the goal of 39 is to reunify the children with their biological parents. So unless the parental rights are voluntarily or involuntarily being terminated, there can be some waiting time. It's a two-step process. Now, what about adoptions in the state of Florida? Well, I've thought long and hard about this, and at the risk of oversimplifying it, I'm going to create two broad categories of adoptions in the state of Florida, and that's public adoptions and private adoptions. And when I'm talking about a public adoption, I'm talking about an adoption of a foster care child by utilizing one of the community-based care nonprofit organizations that contract with the state of Florida to manage the child welfare system. So the state of Florida's has an interesting system. In the 1990s, they privatized the child welfare system. And so what Florida does is it contracts with various nonprofit agencies that administer the child welfare. Again, this is the Chapter 39 dependency foster care children in the state of Florida. So in, let's take a look here. So for instance, the Community Partnership for Children, this is a particular nonprofit agency that administers child welfare over several counties in the state of Florida. A public adoption, the way I'm defining it, is you would go through them and you would say, I want to be a foster child, I want to foster a child, or I want to adopt a child. And what they would do is they would work with you and follow all the guidelines that need to be done in order to adopt a child in the state of Florida. One of the benefits of this is oftentimes these are children who need adoptive families because maybe the parental rights have already been terminated, and so they want to find their, quote, forever home, and they don't want to live in uncertainty with foster parents. And so another benefit of this is, besides serving some of the neediest children, is that it is a lot less expensive than private adoptions, or it can be a lot less expensive than private adoptions. And so the way I define a private adoption would be multiple. So private adoptions, in my definition, again, are all the other types of adoptions, whether that's a simple, relatively straightforward adoption, such as a step-parent adoption that's uncontested. That's a relatively straightforward adoption. In fact, there are forms available online at the Florida Family Law Forms website. It's a state of Florida website, and it has forms available if you are pursuing a step-parent adoption that's uncontested. This can be done on your own. I consider that, again, a private adoption because you're not involving a child who is in protection under Chapter 39. So a step-parent adoption, a grandparent adoption, any relative adoption. Okay, so these are relatively straightforward adoptions, but you still oftentimes will need the help of an attorney to draft up all the appropriate paperwork. What are the other types of private adoptions? Well, there's the ones that maybe you're familiar with or you think about, and these are the agency. So there's a lot of agencies, adoption agencies, and what they do is they work with pregnant women and prospective couples. And so the pregnant women will come to the agency, and then they have an active role in helping select the parents. And so there's a lot of control, in a sense, over a situation where undoubtedly the pregnant mother feels not in control, and this gives her the ability to vet and select the adoptive parents. Here is an example of American adoptions. This is how adoption works today. I've got a link to this website because it's a pretty good website. It explains a lot of information about how adoptions work today. And so what they do is they help facilitate the whole process. So they work with lawyers and they work with specialists to do what's called a home study, to vet you as an adoptive couple. They work with the pregnant mother. They provide her counseling. They get her the benefits that she's entitled to under the law while she's pregnant. They do everything. And these situations are typically, you've got a couple, an adoptive couple that wants an infant child, wants a child that's just been born. Perhaps for whatever reason they don't want an older child, which they could get through foster care in a public adoption. They want an infant child, and so you go to an adoption agency, and they can help facilitate that. One of the drawbacks of these, of course, is that they can be very expensive because you're paying for a lot of services and you're paying for a lot of specialists, and so that's how that works. So those are what I call the two basic broad categories of adoptions in the state of Florida, public and private. So here's an example of step-parent adoption. Let me go to the top here. Again, this website, I've got a link to it below. It's a self-help website by the Florida courts, and it has the forms that you would need if you want to do a step-parent adoption. Here it is, step-parent adoption. So it's all the forms here. You can take a look at them. And again, this is, in my definition, is a private adoption. You're just doing it on your own, or maybe with the help of an attorney who's help walking you through this. Here's the joint petition, and you just fill it out and fill out all the paperwork. That would be the simplest, one of the simplest forms of private adoption and least expensive. I've got a link here to a consumer pamphlet put together by the Florida Bar. Help you if you're interested in more information. I've also got a link here to the Florida Guardian Ad Litem Dependency Practice Manual. This is a long manual. It's got a lot of information. It's not too old, so it should be relatively up to date. You'd have to check to see if there's any differences, but this manual goes into great detail about what I would call public adoptions, or adoptions that are done of foster care children, and how that works. And let's just say it's very complex. It can get very complex, especially if the parents are not prepared to terminate their rights as biological parents. I've also got a link to this case, In Re SNW. This case is an interesting case for explaining how Chapter 63 and Chapter 39 can work together, and it also shows an interesting provision that the Florida legislature added to Chapter 63 that allows these private adoption agencies to intervene in the dependency hearings, to intervene in the Chapter 39 proceedings when we're talking about a child who is under the care of the state. And so this situation would be, let's say, an adoptive parent, not an adoptive parent, but a mother, or the mother and father who have a child under the protection of 39 want to seek adoption. So they can go to the adoption agency and basically work with them, and then the adoption agency will intervene in the dependency hearing and let the court know that they are working with the parent to place their child for adoption. And so at that point, the agency can step in, the independent agency can step in, intervene in the action, and do what is necessary to get the adoption completed. So this is an interesting case. It describes how this interventional right needs to be applied. This is a case where the trial court denied it. I've also got a link to this law review article, Florida Adoption Intervention Statute. It goes into more detail about that, and it shows. I like the article because it gives you an idea of the interplay between Chapter 63 and Chapter 39 when it comes to the adoption of foster care children, and how that works in the state of Florida with the private adoption agencies. So that's a brief overview of adoptions. There's, again, multiple types, and in my big broad category, there's the public adoption, and then there's everything else, which I call the private adoption. If you disagree with that categorization, please let me know, because I don't want to oversimplify it. Or if you have any questions, please let me know below. And if you want me to expand on any topic in here, let me know. And I'll see y'all again next time.